I think if you have an interest, an itch, especially in your early years, you have to scratch it. You can't go, oh, this isn't going to really be practical, or, agents at CAA are not going to be interested in this, or the executives at NBC won't care about this. No, whatever it is, if you're interested in clownfish, if you're interested in wall-to-wall carpeting and the history of it, whatever it is, you have to let yourself follow that path, scratch that itch, become an expert in it, pretend it's like your PhD, dissertation, whatever it is, and just keep going down that path, because things will open up. You might not end up having a series about clownfish or wall-to-wall carpeting, but it will lead somewhere. Don't crowdsource your voice. Don't use social media to sort of say, well, let me see if I put this out there, I'll get more likes. Don't do that. Go into kind of a metaphorical underground bunker, at least for a while, or at the same time that you're doing other stuff, and have a space that's just yours, that just belongs to you.
Benztown president Dave Chachi Dennis loves radio and all of his radio friends.
Hey, Chachi.
Hey, everybody.
Because Chachi loves everybody.
My guest today is one of the most unique voices in broadcasting, a storyteller who somehow manages to make you laugh, think, and learn all at the same time. He's built a career that spans comedy, journalism, television, radio, podcasting, even Broadway, blending humor with a deep curiosity about the world and the people in it. From his early days writing The Wishbone to becoming a correspondent on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart to appearances on The Tonight Show, he's carved out a lane that's entirely his own. You've heard him as a panelist on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, seen him on CBS Sunday Morning, and watched him host Henry Ford's Innovation Nation. He's traveled the world, interviewed Pope Francis, reported from the Vatican, and even read scripture in Spanish at the Papal Mass at Madison Square Garden. His podcast, New York Times bestselling book, Mobituaries, shines a light on the people history forgot, reminding us that some of the most meaningful stories are the ones we almost missed. He's also the 2026 recipient of the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation Inside Award, recognizing his impact on elevating thoughtful, intelligent storytelling in our industry. Simply put, he represents the very best of what broadcasting can be, and today I'm lucky to call him a guest. Mo Rocca, congratulations on just receiving the LABF Inside Award. So grateful for you taking the time to come to NAB to obviously receive that well-deserved award and spend some time on the podcast with me. Thanks, man, for being here.
Well, thank you, Chachi. And it's not only a great honor, it's a great looking award. I noticed that my friend Bill Owens, the former executive producer of 60 Minutes, accepted the award on behalf of 60 Minutes a few years ago. And I called him and I said, tell me about this. And he said, it's a great group of people. It's a great honor and it's a great looking award. And it is.
Thank you, man. And again, appreciate everything you do for the industry. I want to dive in and learn more about you. Tell me a little bit about growing up.
I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland. I would say that my diet, if you will, my media diet growing up was divided into three. It was dopey sitcoms and hour-long dramas. As a 9-year-old, I memorized the TV Guide, which is a little scary, right? And I mean, granted, this was pre-cable, so it wasn't totally sociopathic, but it was a little nuts. I loved Broadway cast albums. I used to listen to old show tunes and I used to love that. And I loved the World Book Encyclopedia, the 1974 edition, if anyone out there remembers. It's sort of beige with brown lining. The facts in brief, I'd come home after school in elementary school and junior high, lie on my stomach on the red family room carpet and just page through there. So hats off to World Book. We were not a Britannica family. We were Americans.
We were World Book too. Yeah. I absolutely remember World Book. That was the best. And that so huge too.
So huge.
That whole set
I kept the set and I have it in our apartment in New York.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So you knew pretty early on that media was something you wanted to pursue?
I did know that. I didn't know in what form. I thought, oh, I want to be on Broadway, which I eventually did, or I want to be an actor, which I've done here and there. I noticed there's a clip of Young and the Restless running. I have a recurring role, as in I've been on it twice as Milton, the lovelorn accountant.
So you're a soap opera star as well.
That's right. That's right. And I suppose I would say I was a news junkie, all kinds of news. I loved it. I think part of that is growing up in D.C., which is a mill town, kind of, they say L.A. is a mill town too. And I always imagined if I grew up there, I'd know all about the different studios, if only by osmosis. And it was sort of that way growing up in Washington. You just kind of, even if you wanted to avoid it, which I didn't, you absorbed what was going on in the news.
You're incredibly well-rounded. It sounds like you are studious. You obviously have a, role in CBS Sunday Morning, Jon Stewart. So it's in Broadway. It's rare, candidly, that you see someone with so much talent in all these different facets of the business. A lot of people are straight ahead news or straight ahead Broadway. And were you, as a kid, was it hard for you to keep focus, or you were just kind of open and excited to take on anything in the entertainment space?
Gee whiz, I think both. I think that the fact that being in media and entertainment was kind of hallowed, celebrated, and famously competitive was inspiring and also probably anxious making. I loved creative writing. I had good schools growing up. Montgomery County had terrific public schools, and I went to a good Jesuit high school. But I think I only really got my bearings with my first job in television, which was writing for a kids show on PBS called Wishbone, which for people in their 30s, early 40s at this point, they grew up with. And it won a Peabody Award. I really have my friend Stephanie Simpson, great talent to thank for bringing me on board. And it was a show, a live action about a Jack Russell Terrier who in his dream life became the hero of different classic novels. Writing for it was like a writing assignment from an English professor on acid. I mean, it was insane. How do you take something like Don Quixote, distill it to 30 minutes for an audience of 6 to 11-year-olds as told through the eyes of a Jack Russell Terrier? But it was that kind of a thing. That was my storytelling boot camp. And it was hard work, and it was really fulfilling. And it helped me learn the hard and fulfilling work of telling a story. Before then, I'd done improv comedy. I'd done comedic things. I'd like to think well, but how I learned to really craft a story, how I honed the tools, and I still have that toolbox, really started with that show.
When you first got that gig in PBS, I mean, that's a big deal to go work for PBS. What was that like? Was it anxiety inducing? What was the first day like?
Well, it was. Even though I was working with friends, I didn't know what I was doing. And so there was some tough love involved. And my friend who I mentioned, she really guided me. And she was a great boss, but she was also tough. And she said, you got to do the work. And, I was reading books that I was supposed to have read in college and didn't oftentimes. I was revisiting stuff that I'd kind of brushed past, like Homer's Odyssey. I mean, we did an episode about that.
That's pretty heavy, man.
Right. Jack Russell Terrier as Odysseus, And it was also good for me because a lot of the kids I went to college with who wanted to work in media only wanted to live in New York or LA. And this job was in the suburbs of Dallas, in a place called Plano, Texas. And I kind of knew in my gut that to get to a certain place, I had to make, and this is with all due respect to the people of Dallas, which is a great city, you had to make a personal sacrifice. I couldn't just live in New York and do exactly the place I wanted to live and do exactly what I wanted. And so that was good for me, I think, to go and live in this suburb of a city I knew nothing about and just really focus.
It's an important lesson. And so much of my business, radio, the industry we're in, is moving up and down the dial, right. Going from different city to city, and you really get a different experience and just understand the country as a whole from all those different perspectives. Yeah. So from PBS, where do you land next?
I knew, and I had always, even before I was on PBS, I had been a struggling actor in New York City for a couple of years. Some of you may know me from the Southeast Asia tour of the musical Grease. I mean, I did a range of jobs. I played Duty in Jakarta, Singapore, and in Hong Kong.
No kidding. It's all in English.
In English, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. We were in Jakarta. It was controversial because if you remember in Greece, Rizzo thinks that she's pregnant out of wedlock.
Right,
that didn't go over well. In Indonesia, I mean, we had to tweak the plot a little bit. I'm not sure if the rights holders knew that. After I did PBS, I thought I want to be performing, and I didn't know how to do that. I wanted to be on camera. I didn't know how to do that exactly. I had a better sense of what a good story was and how to tell one. And an agent I had at the time told me about a show called The Daily Show, which had just started. It was before Jon Stewart was even on it. But at the same time, this was all happening concurrently. At the same time, living in the suburbs of Dallas, I began having a hunger to learn more about history because I was living in a town called Plano. Again, with all due respect to the good people of Plano, it's a great place. And yeah, I love the Dickies east of 75, right? The barbecue there. It was also kind of sterile. Sorry. It was a lot of sort of McMansions.
Sure.
And I began having this sort of spiritual hunger to know more about history. And so I began really on a lark, on a yen, as they used to say, traveling around the country on my own nickel, visiting the homes and grave sites of the presidents that you can't remember were president. I know it sounds really kooky, quirky, whatever, but it was real. I began pulling over to the side of the road wherever I was, looking at historic markers, because I began having this hunger to know what had happened before I was alive in the place where I was. Sure. I just developed this.
Truly remarkable at your age. I mean,
well, this was in my 20s.
But still, I mean, that young, most people are, I think, more focused on maybe coming to a place like Las Vegas and having a good time.
I know. I sort of skipped over all that, unfortunately. I'll get back to that in my late midlife crisis, right? But I developed this avocation. I started taking pictures, writing about all these places I would go, like the Benjamin Harrison House and on Delaware Avenue in Indianapolis, interested in the people who worked and volunteered at these places where they really had to sell the visitors on why they mattered. At the same time, I didn't know what to do with my career. So I was just doing this as sort of to fill this need, this hunger. And this agent said, why don't you take some of these stories to this place called The Daily Show, which was fairly new. And so to make a long story short-ish, it was during the Clinton impeachment crisis. And I had visited Greenville, Tennessee, the home of Andrew Johnson, our 17th president, the first impeached president. And I thought there was something kind of funny about how does a hometown memorialize a president that's been impeached? And I interviewed people in the town, the people who ran the Andrew Johnson dry cleaners, the motel and all that. And I brought it to The Daily Show, which was at the time covering the Clinton impeachment. And I said, well, I could do this as a story on camera. And they said, listen, you've never been on camera, but we'll give you a shot. And I went on with the guarantee of only doing 2 stories. And that's how my on-camera journalistic career really began.
What a tremendous break, but at the same time, the fact that you took that initiative. So you actually, is that a package? I know in the news world that'd be a package, but you put this together already and then took that mostly pre-prepared and pitched that to The Daily Show. Am I understanding that correctly?
I did it sort of as a photographic journal. I didn't have the means to turn it into a sort of a package on spec. I was able to tell when I was pitching the story of what I'd seen and how I thought it might be a funny segment with a series of photographs. But I think what I took away from that, there's not a lot of advice I feel authoritative about giving people, younger people who ask for advice. But I do believe that the lesson here was I had a hunger and an interest in something without having a grand plan, and I just went with it. I got in a car and I started visiting these quirky historic sites, interviewing people, not because I had an exact idea of where it could go, but I just had this interest, and I think it's what made me hopefully unique, a specialist, something. And I think that's what audiences respond to. When you are authentically, genuinely interested in something, you can take them along for the ride. And the people I was pitching to at The Daily Show found my enthusiasm contagious, and they thought, what? You went to Andrew Johnson's hometown of Greenville, Tennessee? Why would I care? But suddenly I'm caring. I'm going to put you on TV with this.
When you saw that package run about Andrew Johnson, what did that feel like seeing it? And it's Comedy Central at the time, right? Daily Show's on Comedy. I mean, major network.
our cable network?
That's a great question. I haven't thought about it in a long time. It was October, I think, of 1998. And it was thrilling. It was sort of out of body. And I don't think it went over like gangbusters. I think it got, the studio laughter it wasn't sweetened. It was real. It was there. But it was thrilling that this idea that I had been nurturing for a long time. Little did I know it would end up on TV. I didn't go in there with, I'll do this to do that, to do this, and that will get me there. I just was interested in this material. And it ended up there, and it was thrilling. It was thrilling.
They sign you to the 2.
Yeah.
And then did they really quickly then pick you up to do more?
They did. And it went on and on. And I was different than the other. There were correspondents, people who have done amazing things like the wonderful Steve Carell. My office mate was Vance DeGeneres, who's remained a good friend. Stephen Colbert was coming in and out, doing his own show, another show, Strangers with Candy on Comedy Central. Beth Littleford, she did an amazing Barbara Walters parody. There were great, great people. And I was the only one who hadn't come really from the comedy world. I had come from a world of children's television writing on Wishbone and kind of a historian as avocation. So, yeah.
And you hear so much about Jon Stewart. I've never met him, but that show has been a launching pad in a lot of ways, much like SNL. Yourself, obviously Colbert, Steve Carell. These massive stars. Does that is Jon Stewart have an eye, much like, and I'm brain fading on the creator of SNL right now,
Lorne Michaels.
Thank you. Is it similar to that? He just has an eye?
I think he does have an eye. What springs to mind is Trevor Noah. I think it only appeared on the show a few times before he was named, in part, I think, by Jon Stewart as his successor before Jon came back. But I got from Jon, I have a vivid memory of going to, not the NAB, but the thing it was in Pasadena. It used to be at Pasadena when everybody had money, and where they would showcase new shows. I'm forgetting the name of it right now. They're not upfronts, but it's something like that. But I remember going there early in the tenure, and they had a beautiful pool, and it was a beautiful day, and all of us were kind of laying out by the pool. I think maybe some of us were doing a little day drinking. And I remember Jon coming out from his room wearing sweats like a true New Yorker or New Jerseyan, kind of grizzled. He still smoked then, with a stack of papers, and coming to consult with our executive producer about stuff, and furiously, like very laser, like focused, working, and then going back into the hotel room. So I think aside from his talent, there was just an intense work ethic of sharpening, honing, polishing, making things better and better. And I think also being true to a point of view. I think that was a struggle early on that I saw him face and he had told the story that Barbie turned 40 or something at the time. I think I have the dates right. And there were 2 jokes that the writers had written him. One that was making fun of the Barbie spokeswoman's looks, an older woman. And then the second joke making fun of Barbie for being sort of retrograde. And he later, he didn't like that the 2 jokes, there was no point of view. They were opposite jokes. And I think he then said, this show can't just be a bratty kid throwing spitballs. It has to actually say something. And some people might disagree with that. They might have liked a show that was more like a bratty kid throwing spitballs. But I remember thinking, whatever you do, you don't want it to be preachy, but you want to know what you're saying. You want it to have a point of view.
It's another phenomenal lesson. Really, truly, I've never heard it explained that way, but it makes a lot of sense. So do you really sense a difference in now your profile that you're on I know there's still early days in the show, but it really starts to take off like wildfire. And do you feel now you're getting more offers and opportunities?
Yeah, I did. But at the same time, I didn't really know what my voice was. I was in my 20s. And I was on this very hot show. Hot in a very particular way because it wasn't on everyone's radar. So in a way, it also had a very intense, cool, hip factor on college campuses, precisely because these college kids' parents didn't know what it was. So I was on it at a time that was extremely, like, the right people were watching.
Avant-garde.
Yeah. But I didn't know what my voice was, and I found myself, the style of the show was all very dry, like, sort of saying things very kind of ironically, with an arched eyebrow. And while I was learning a lot and appreciated being on a hot show, I didn't know what my voice was. I didn't really know what it was. And my sense of humor tended to be a little warmer, a little loopier with my friends. And so then my friend Adam Felber, who is a stalwart on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, said, do you want to come on the show? And it ended up being unexpectedly a really formative for me in a way, because at first when I was on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, I was doing my daily show voice of everything being sort of ironic. But then I took the step of just talking like myself, the way I'm talking to you right now. And at first I kind of, when you hear your own voice, you go, ugh. Sure. But then I started getting laughs and I thought, all right, well, this is important for me. I'm actually stretching a muscle by being myself on air here. And so that was another step for me. It was another step for me.
And when that changed, did you find yourself having to create more content in terms of it now becomes, and much like I remember early on in my career, it was likened to be my Rick D's, that there's a big locomotive and you've got to constantly jamming, shoveling the coal into the locomotive.
Absolutely. I was always carrying around, as I have in my pocket now, a little notebook, like where I'm scrolling down ideas that sometimes if somebody finds it in 30 years, they'll think, what is that? Also because I have terrible handwriting, these little dribs and drabs of ideas. But I then started coming up with show ideas. I became very, I'm going to use the word promiscuous. Larry King asked me to be his man on the floor during the 2004 political conventions. And I loved it because I was being a little bit more myself. And I also loved, I'm an old soul, and Larry King and I both happen to know every lyric to a Johnny Mercer, Bobby Darin album where they had sung duets of Tin Pan Alley songs like Who Takes Care of the Timekeeper's Daughter When the Timekeeper's Busy Keeping Time, like old things like that, or Ace in the Hole. And so I was in a very, as they say in the improv world, yes and mode, saying yes to different things. And I think that helped me find my voice. And at the same time, I was doing a lot of pitching to your point. And after my father died in 2004, I went into a very quiet place, which I found was very creative for me. So I was sad, but I was also a little insular. And I came up with this idea for a cooking show where I would go around the country cooking with different grandmothers and grandfathers. And there was two reasons. One, it was practical because I had been a judge on Iron Chef a lot and knew the people at Food Network who were starting Cooking Channel. But also I knew from my interviewing thus far that if somebody was doing something they like doing, they were more likely to talk freely and openly as opposed to sitting across from you with all these cameras pointing at them. So if I was essentially the lackey, the gopher, the sous chef, whatever you want to call me, the assistant in the kitchen to these home cooks, I could get them to talk about being in an internment camp as a child, hiding from the Nazis in Dubienka, Poland, like Ruth, or the first episode of season 1, who had hidden from the Nazis, in a barn for over a year. I could get people to tell me intense, really moving stories. And I also learned from that experience that life is not divided into half-hour sitcom and hour-long drama. Ruth could be telling me something harrowing about growing up in Nazi-occupied Poland, and the next moment we were laughing about what would happen if she was observing, the Shabbat, but there was an eclipse, and then, in the middle of the day. So, because of, the sun anyway. And so the laughter and very poignant stuff could be sit cheek by jowl. And
that's
so that
also
was,
a phenomenal, no pun intended, but recipe and awesome lesson because I had honestly never thought about that way, but it is a very uncomfortable environment and people are going to probably put their guard down and be much more open to talk to you. And that show you had a lot of success with that show.
Well, thank you. I'm very, very proud of it. It really came from a very personal place. And, I also learned something interesting about interviewing in there is that generally people who don't want to be on TV are better at being on TV as interview subjects because they're not trying to sell you something, So we would go for the grandparents that were great characters whose neighbors said, you got to get this guy on the air. You got to get this lady, she's hilarious. And they would generally say, why do I want to go on TV? And I'd say, well, that's why I want to be on TV with you because you're just being who you are. I want to have to come to you. I don't want you coming to me. I want in the interview for me to have to figure out who you are. I don't want you trying to accommodate me so that you can sell me on your margarita mix or whatever you're selling.
Sure. I love this. So, tell me a little bit about cooking and why you're passionate about it.
Well, I'm not passionate about that. That's the thing. This is where I had to be transparent. I wanted to learn, but you can only really learn by doing. So I would say that on the air, when I was learning to make this range of recipes over 4 seasons, I was good. But the problem is when I went home, I didn't do it. So I at home, I do not do the cooking.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about Broadway.
Well, Broadway was something that to me was incredibly magical growing up, the idea, because if you grew up in Washington, you're not so far from Broadway that it feels like another planet, but it still is. It's a train ride. It's convincing your parents to take you there, as they did with me multiple times. It was magical. And I just happened to be doing a mentorship program, taking kids to the theater to learn about Broadway. And one of the other mentors is Pulitzer Prize winning James Lapine, who wrote with Stephen Sondheim Sunday in the Park with George and Into the Woods, a really great giant. And we were the mentors had a cocktails one night, and he looked at me and he said, you could make a living working in musical theater. And I went, funny that. And so he called me up, and it was like the perfect thing. He called me up and said, would you come into this musical 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee for 2 months without an audition? He just thought I was right for it. And he had the power to be able to just do that and drop me in the middle of a show. And it was magical.
And going on stage for the first time.
Nerve-wracking. It was, and if anyone's seen the show, it's sort of an interactive show. It's essentially a live spelling bee, but it's beautifully written. It was nerve-wracking, but my co-star was a woman who's become a big Broadway star named Jennifer Simard, who was in Death Becomes Her and Company. She's done all sorts of amazing things. So it was a great experience. Greta Lee was in our cast, who's become a big award winner.
I feel comfortable in a podcast environment because you can redo something or something is being pre-recorded. But just earlier today when I was introducing you on stage, that was very nerve-wracking because you were live. It's a different feel. There's an audience there. And that's the closest thing I've ever come to a crowd of that size. But I can see where it's electrifying and a different feel as opposed to being in front of cameras in a pre-recorded environment.
It absolutely is. For a spot, because listen, I've been around. If I smoked, I'd be taking a drag on a cigarette right now. But I used to go on the Today Show when it was Matt and Katie, and I would do these spots, these pop culture spots with 2 others, actually actress Hillary Burton from One Tree Hill and E. Jean Carroll, who was terrific, great writer. And the 3 of us would do these panels about reality shows when they were exploding. And I could hear my heart beating. Isn't that crazy? I could hear my heart beating. And I thought, if I look down, I'm going to see my shirt doing this. And I will tell you, each time in the moments before, I thought, why am I putting myself through this? But it was only because of that live element, which really was like a cardiac strain. But that's part of what made it crackle.
I'm sure.
It is, you cannot replicate that. So there is something to be said for it.
You mentioned your father passed away in 2004. Yeah. Were you close with your parents?
Yeah, very. Yeah. And I mentioned in my remarks getting this wonderful award that my father loved obits. He loved obituaries, which is kind of funny because he was so buoyant and optimistic. But I think he loved them because of a really good obituary is like the trailer for an Oscar-winning biopic. It has sort of this drama and this sweet, the highs, the lows, the agony, the defeat, the triumphs. And it's about somebody's life, not their death, really, if it's well done. And that's what gave me the idea for doing obituaries with my podcast was, this is a great vehicle because you want something, right? That coming up with show ideas, you need to be specific. It needs to come from a real place, but it also needs to be flexible enough, not just for economic reasons, but that as well, that you can do 1,000 episodes.
I listened to the John Denver episode and it starts talking about drama in an experimental plane that he was flying in.
Right.
And I had honestly kind of forgotten about John Denver to some degree. I mean, I knew from the Muppets because of, a kid and so forth.
So great in the Muppets.
But you do such a great job of really painting that picture.
Yeah.
And podcast really stuck with me. And the hits that John Denver wrote was just true. It was really remarkable. And he was 53, which seems like so young. I didn't realize that either.
And, listen, the pop culture mill is heartless and can be cruel. And I do remember that when John Denver died in that plane crash, he had become so uncool that there were a lot of jokes made about it. It was sort of like, oh, this guy, this kind of has been. No. He was a big deal. He was a giant. People loved that music. And you can dismiss celebrities who take political stands. I get that. But he was kind of walking that walk about environmentalism early on. I mean, and so when he was not included in We Are the World, he was really hurt. We addressed that in the podcast, and it was kind of unfair.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
he really had done a lot.
The guy that, I'm brain fading on, who wrote the Dukes of Hazzard theme song, was included on We Are the World and walked out. I saw the documentary. It was really fascinating. But fact that
he walked out.
Yes.
I love him. Outlaw Country.
Yes.
Lukenbach, Texas with Willie Nelson. Who's his duet partner? Waylon Jennings. Thank you. Ding,
yes,
ding, ding,
yes,
ding, ding,
thank you.
The great Waylon Jennings. I did not know that he walked
out. He did.
Out.
It ran so late.
Great.
Lionel Richie and Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson, because it was after the Grammys that evening that they all went there, and it got so late and early in morning hours. Yeah. He just had enough of it.
Right.
But you're right. John Denver would have been an amazing fit for that song. Yeah. How does the gig come to be at CBS?
The gig came because I was sort of at a crossroads, and I didn't know where I could go with my own interests, frankly, and do stories that could be funny when they were meant to be funny, but not funny when they're not meant to be funny. It's sort of a range of things. And Andrew Hayward, who was then president of CBS News, met me at a conference, and he said, you have a voice. It needs to develop. And I liked hearing that. I liked somebody saying that's the Catholic school in me where I went for high school, sort of not saying, oh, you're amazing. Instead saying, you've got a voice. It needs to develop. You need to work on it. And there's this show that I think would be a good place for you. So he took me to meet Rand Morrison, who is still the executive producer and is, for good reason, a legend in the news business. And I started by doing commentaries, opinion pieces, and then I ran out of opinions. I got sick of my own opinions. But Rand said, well, why don't you start doing stories? And it was a learning process, because sometimes I remember once saying to him, well, I don't know that I can make this particular subject funny. And he said, well, you don't need to be. It's okay. You don't have to be. And I loved hearing that. But that's how it came to me. And I was doing several other things concurrently. That's what at one point, I think I was doing 4 different shows, but my commitment to the show grew and grew and grew. So I've been there for almost 20 years now.
Tremendous work ethic and absolutely incredible career. We're very fortunate that Bill Whitaker has been the MC for the Giants of Broadcasting Award for the last several years. And I got to have a discussion, and he had told me that pretty much the assignments that he decides to do, packages that he puts together, he has a lot of autonomy and, puts those things forth and is able to go out and do those. Is it the same for you? Do you get to choose a lot?
I would say that at this point, probably about 60% of the stories I do are my pitches. That said, it is very collaborative. So I may come up with a story idea, but the producer I work with, there's a good group of, I'd say, about 4 or 5 producers that I work with, some much more than others. And in discussions with those producers, the story will then evolve. Conversely, if they come to me and say, here's the story we want to do, then I will absolutely say, well, okay, I'll do it, but I think we need to do it this way. So it's definitely a collaboration both ways. It's like going back to college and taking only electives. Listen, I was the kid who loved the variety pack of cereals. I mean, nobody liked the All Brand.
The little ones. I totally remember those. Yes.
Yeah. Nobody liked the All Brand or whatever. It was like the Sugar Smacks, the Corn Pops, the Fruit Loops. So I love that. I mean, it's kind of like a creative playground. If you like CBS Sunday Morning and you think certain things about what it must be like to work there, you're right. it's very fulfilling.
I am with your diverse skill set and be able to not only do all different facets of the business, but be so good at it. I really hold you, Dick Clark, Ryan Seacrest, kind of that ilk. Do you do any sort of producing in terms of something thought about?
I want to do more with my cooking show, with my podcast, my obituaries. I was a producer on both those. And so I want to do more. I mean, and that's, I have a 20-month-old daughter at home.
Congratulations.
She's just the love of our lives. And the early years very earliest years are so important. But my brain is starting to move back towards what idea can I put out there? What idea can I birth, if you will? And so there are more ideas that I want to come up with and realize.
Tell me about Henry Ford's Innovation Nation.
The Henry Ford's Innovation Nation ran for 10 seasons as part of the EI, the Educational Informational Block that broadcast networks are mandated to fulfill. It's an obligation of about 3 hours a week. Most of these programs are partnered with institutions, companies, brands. And this idea was a partnership between the Henry Ford Museum, which I had heard about, a jewel of the Midwest in Dearborn, Michigan. Extraordinary collection. Extraordinary.
I've been there and I thought it was just going to be vehicles, but it goes way beyond vehicles.
Oh, beyond the earliest steam engines that were literally dug up from England and brought over. Henry Ford brought the Wright brothers home, the boyhood home, and the bicycle shop from Dayton, Ohio. I mean, the chair that Lincoln was sitting in when he was shot. I mean, it just, the collection is extraordinary. I grew up, with the Smithsonian in DC, but I had heard about this museum, and the Henry Ford Museum wanted national exposure. So they partnered with Lytton Television, which was subsumed by Hearst, to do this show and asked me to host. This was not my pitch, but I was happy to do it because, first of all, I was happy to shill for a museum for something that great. And I'm being a little bit glib there, but I was happy to help put that museum on a more national map and international, frankly. And it really helped them a lot. I think the show and their curators, who became my co-stars, which was a dream for me, really exposed that museum, and it showed in the attendance levels rising and rising. So they asked me to host it. And also I just thought, great, I get to hang out in this museum while I'm shooting a TV show.
Which goes back to the early days of wanting to travel around and learn about presidents and your encyclopedia set. We are at the NAB and at a phenomenal show, very well attended. A lot of students here with the BEA. What is your advice for kids for young adults that are looking to get into this industry, whether it's television, radio, podcasting, in this current environment that we live in with all this new technology, such as AI coming at us?
So a slogan springs to mind, which was a sign off for the Henry Ford's Innovation Nation, which is dream big, don't quit, which I loved. I did not come up with that. Our executive producer, Jim Lichtenstein, did, but I loved it because they're both sides of it. Dream big. You gotta keep thinking of ideas. Don't quit. That word that I wish was in the dictionary, stick-to-itiveness. The two have to go together. You can't have one without the other. But more practically, I think whatever capacity you want to work in, whether it's behind or in front of the camera, writing is really, really important. It's the best way to come up with ideas, to hone them, to develop them. I think that's important. And I think when I was describing my trip around the country, and I should point out, I bought a one-way ticket to Indianapolis and rented a car. And that one way is significant because I didn't know when I'd be coming back. I think if you have an interest, an itch, especially in your early years, you have to scratch it. You can't go, oh, this isn't going to really be practical, or, agents at CAA are not going to be interested in this, or the executives at NBC won't care about this. No, whatever it is, if you're interested in clownfish, or, right, that's right. I think we have a bath toy that's a clownfish that she loves. But if you're interested in wall-to-wall carpeting and the history of it, whatever it is, you have to let yourself follow that path, scratch that itch, become an expert in it, pretend it's like your PhD, dissertation, whatever it is, and just keep going down that path because things will open up. You might not end up having a series about clownfish or wall carpeting, but it will lead somewhere. Don't crowdsource your voice. Don't use social media to sort of say, well, let me see if I put this out there, I'll get more likes. Don't do that. Go into kind of a metaphorical underground bunker, at least for a while, or at the same time that you're doing other stuff, and have a space that's just yours, that's just belongs to you, where you write that play that may never get produced, where that's the great Nick Bargatze was talking about, write that stand-up act or one-person show that might or might not see the light of day as that, but could end up in something else. And I don't care what capacity you're working in, but the thing I find is that there are a lot of people with fancy educations that can't write. And I think it's a problem for them and for the industry and for news. So I'm giving you a whole bunch of stuff.
No, that's amazing. That's so many takes.
My friend John Tollins, who's now the executive producer on Elsbeth on CBS, early on, he's a great playwright and has done a lot of things. Early on, he said, keep something that's just I'm looking at the young people here. My eyes are boring into yours right now. You have to have something that's just yours. Because if everything else is, you're trying to sort of accommodate what you think the industry wants, but keep this thing like it's a diary with your most personal secrets and keep this thing and nurture it and whatever it is. But you have to have something that's just yours to feed your soul and your voice.
Phenomenal takeaway.
Yeah.
Mo Rocca, again, congratulations on the LABF Inside Award, on all your success. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you do for this industry. It is truly remarkable and very grateful to have you in it and for taking the time to be here.
Chachi, what a pleasure talking to you. This was great. Thank you.
Likewise, my friend.
Thanks for listening to Chachi Loves Everybody. If you like the show, we hope you'll leave us a 5-star rating and tell your friends. Make sure to follow on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This has been a Benztown McVeigh podcast production. Hosted and researched by Dave Chachi Dennis. Engineered by Darren Silva. Produced and edited by Jake Urbanik. Show coordinator Suzanne Aksu and Robbie Gessel.